Hi guys, it's the Everyday Vegan here, it's Baz, and I'm today with Richard. And Richard is a friend of mine, and we've met in another video actually about the, what was it called? The Norwich Veggie Vegan Fair or something like that. Yeah. Richard is the founder, CEO and principal artist of a website called Vegan Sidekick, which we'll talk about today because I'm a big fan. And Richard has kindly agreed to actually speak about the website, which is really cool. So Richard, you've been vegan for 14 years, which is just 14. Incredible. So over to you.
Sure. Yeah, I've been vegan for 14 years. Prior to that, I was vegetarian for maybe 13, so most of my life. And I became vegetarian to begin with just because I found out what meat was and decided I didn't want to eat it anymore.
Didn't want to be part of it?
No, because I liked animals.
That's awesome.
And I just felt if I don't have to, I won't do it.
That's really cool, yeah.
And I learned about veganism much later in life.
Yeah.
Because I was only 5 or 6 when I dropped meat.
We'll talk about Vegan Sidekick, which is not actually the title it started off with. So initially you used your own name.
It had the same title, but I began with my face as the profile picture for the avatar. And I did videos to begin with, much like yours, giving advice to people.
Yeah.
But covering the same things that I do now. But they were saying, if someone asks you about protein, if someone asks you what would we do with all the animals, and I was talking to camera and did these things. But then as the page progressed, I was making memes, I was making diagrams and so forth, which people were liking and sharing far more than the videos, which nobody seemed to really care about. And then I made a few images which were stick men, and they were most popular. So I stuck with those. And as I did more and more, I came to realize I should just get rid of these videos of me talking, because these pictures are far more impactful, far more powerful than me. So I took all personality away from it and replaced it with with just the Vegan Sidekick image. Yeah.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit about the site, because there might be a few viewers that don't know the site. So what I know about it is that it's much like you just described. You draw stickmen, and that's an understatement. They are actually very cool comics, and it's basically a lot of arguments that vegans typically have to deal with, put in perspective and contrasted with, well, what is the reality of what you're actually saying?
Yeah, pretty much. Because I find it baffling that an adult who could understand what happens to these animals would want to support it
and be part of it.
And be part of it. And I don't know why anyone would make that decision. But when you talk to people, you very rarely get down to the actual reasoning, but you actually deal with what I would call an excuse. And then my comics lampoon those excuses and show how absurd they really are. And I call them excuses quite openly, because if they were the real reason, then as soon as you explained, well, actually, that doesn't make any sense, they'd say, you're right, after all, I will go vegan. But they don't. They go, then never mind that, here's this one. And then what about this? And what about this?
So what do you think are the real reasons for people not to be vegan?
I can't really put words in people's mouths. From my experience, I have a few friends who aren't vegan. They are perhaps more willing to be honest with me. They will say things like, yeah, you're absolutely right. There is no justification for it.
Yeah.
However, I'm lazy. I'm lazy.
It's convenient.
I like it. It's convenient. I'm one person. What can I do? And I say, well, if everyone had that opinion, and he stops me and he goes, yeah, I know. I know I'm wrong. I think it's apathy. I can't be bothered with all that, you know. I think that's the reality. It's not canine teeth. It's not anything deserted islands. I'm doing this for survival. They know it's not.
Guys, you have to check out those comics. They're hilarious, actually. So if you think back of how Vegan Sidekick started, tell us very briefly about how it started, and maybe then move into what is the philosophy now, what has it become? Because you've got, last time I checked, was about 30,000 likes on Facebook.
More like 47.
That's amazing.
47, something like that. When I began, it was because at the time I'd been living as vegan for many years, and I'd hoped that just by being positive and being nice and just being a normal person around everyone else, that when they found out that I'm vegan, they'd think, veganism isn't crazy, it's not extreme. I've known this man, he's a nice guy, he's pleasant, and he hasn't been in my face about it.
Isn't militant.
And I thought that's the most positive way I could spread non-violence. Essentially, that's what veganism is. It's choosing not to hurt animals. And if people could see you can do it, and it doesn't make you weird, that they'd want to do it. But unfortunately, that didn't work. Majority of people, they think, he's not talking about it, I don't have to then. Because I never ever say to people, excuse me, let's talk about this, because no one wants to hear it. And then people weren't approaching me as I thought they would. So I was getting frustrated with myself, because ultimately I'd become apathetic and I wasn't doing anything. I was avoiding causing harm to animals, but I was aware I wasn't getting anything else done. And I saw other people like Freelee and Durianrider who were quite controversial, but they get it done. They say, you can be healthy, look at us, we're in great shape. And I thought, okay, I can get this across in my own way and deal with the ethical side of it and say, this doesn't make sense, does it? These are what people say, why they support animal abuse, and I'm going to explain why not. And so that's why I began, and then it went from there. And I found that the Stickmen comics were most effective where people found it humorous, and so I injected more and more humour into it, and I had a better and better response. And it exists today for the same reason that I try to get people to realise there isn't a sensible defence in modern society for funding animal abuse, and that there are alternatives. I just try and get inside people's heads, get under the skin a little bit, because if you just have an image that says this is what happens to animals in slaughterhouses and on farms, most people will skip by. They go, oh, I don't want to see an image like that. But if you've got a funny little comic, people will say, oh, I wonder if this is funny, and they'll read it and they might think
it's true.
It's true, and this guy's making fun of something I've said, you know, and then they have to deal with it, and they have to realise, what I say doesn't make any sense.
Now, one thing, and again, very briefly, that you seem to have to deal with a lot is animosity from people who are not vegan. And we've had this chat on the way over, actually, and I said I sort of deal more with people that are vegan and have a go at me for not being a proper vegan. But you have to unfortunately deal with a lot of hate, I would say, and a lot of trolling from people that are not vegan and that feel as though you are trying to tell them how to live your life, which I don't perceive that way, because I guess it comes back to this getting under their skin a little bit. Very briefly, how do you deal with that? Because I often see posts, you sort of clarifying an issue or sort of almost defending yourself, but what's your approach and why do you still react to something like that?
I think that people are upset because they feel that I'm challenging their perspective. If the comic deals with something they literally have said, then I am literally saying, no, that is logically incorrect. And so therefore they feel told off. So I can understand why most people don't like that. It takes some humility to step back and say, actually, you're right, I'm wrong. And so I can appreciate why someone could get it, react negatively immediately. But sometimes I get it from people who say, I've never said this, how dare you? And I say, well, it's not about you then. You know, if you've never said this, it's not you. Don't feel offended. But I feel the need to explain things because I guess I just try to treat people with respect. I try to cover people's points. So if I'm getting 10, 15 people 1 week saying, you've said this, you that, I feel, well, I need to put this in perspective.
You have to say something.
Rather than respond to everybody saying the same thing every time. Actually, no, I did this. Actually, I haven't said that. That's not what I did. I'd rather make a post and say, can I just get this clarified to anybody who's going to read it? I think that it helps the cause in general, so people don't feel ignored. But it's becoming harder and harder to do because of the size of the page. I've started to have to ignore a lot more, and there's just not the time. And now I wake up in the morning and I look through the comments, and sometimes I just turn it off because.
And I guess to an extent, you know, by acknowledging the comment, you're giving them the time and space they wanted to voice their opinion. Sometimes it might be better to ignore.
Yes.
Cool. So one thing that was really important for Richard to talk about was the difference in our approaches. And you sort of said, well, Baz, you're a lot nicer about it all. And I guess that's how you started off as well. But you get a lot of hate from non-vegans. I get a lot of hate from vegans. But what's your opinion about that? How do you deal with that? Yeah,
your approach is far more to do with dealing with people who are already thinking about going vegan. You hope to talk to people who are saying, how do I go vegan? And you want to help them. You're much more approachable in that respect. Whereas I'm far more on the front line, so to speak, dealing with people who are saying, I have no interest. I've had no interest. I'm not doing anything wrong. Why should I? And I'm saying, whatever your reason is, I have an image to explain why that's actually nonsense. So you're not challenging anybody. So you're in a position where, not particular in videos.
It's not my intent. That's right.
Yeah, it's not your intent. It's certainly different to me in that respect, and I would like to become more like you in that respect. And in other pages I've seen, I have a friend called Max who has an Instagram page, Max Vegan Muscle.
Okay.
He's very.
Let's put a link for that in as well.
Yeah, he's fantastic, and he's very well educated. He's much more of a people person than I am. When I'm talking to someone online and there's a disagreement, I end up becoming very analytical and saying fact.
But you are very passionate about the topic, and I guess that's important as well. I've got a big interest in the difference between science and religion and the arguments that people use there, and I often find that the way that people argue about veganism and non-veganism has certain connotations from that sphere as well, where people get very passionate and it becomes this black and white argument. And based from that, I've never found that the super militant approach approach works, and that's why, you know, when I get comments on my channel saying, you know, a proper vegan, you know, you're doing veganism wrong, and food that you go buy at Tesco is not vegan because it's all about health. I go, well, but it is how I see veganism, and I think it is a sliding scale, and eating meat only twice a week is a lot better than eating it 5 times a week. And I see people moving towards that ultimate goal of being the good vegan. The journey is what's important, not the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But I think we essentially agree on so very briefly, vegans that don't agree with you.
Yeah, I find that, as you say, you have trouble sometimes with vegans saying that you're not vegan enough, or you're not heavy-handed.
Not a proper vegan.
Not a proper vegan. I get it both ways. I get some saying that I'm too black and white, that I'm too hard-lined, that I'm not allowing people room to develop through vegetarianism, veganism, and I'm saying it's all or nothing. And I also get people the other way saying that I'm too soft, that I'm not an abolitionist, and
You should be on the streets.
I don't really know what they're saying. So I do have some of what you're experiencing, but it is mainly the other way. But I agree with you. A lot of people get the wrong idea about my images, that these super militant people think that my images are as militant as they are, that they're actually sort of hitting people over the head, and unfortunately a lot of non-vegans think that too. As far as I'm concerned, it's more like you have non-vegans saying these things, in reality saying, deserted islands,
just pointing
canine
it out,
teeth, my ancestors, and I'm saying, well, if they're going to say
We're
that,
meant to eat meat.
if they're going to say that, I'm going to explain why that's nonsense. The end.
Yeah, I always think it's really funny about the internet, isn't it? People make it sound as though you sort of sneak into their house and you wait until they wake up and you go, look at this image! I mean, to follow your page or not, or to go onto my YouTube channel is voluntary. And that's why I always laugh at people that put hate on internet sites or they troll, because they make it sound like you're making them look at that or making them change their mind. Is that something
It's
you
bizarre.
feel? Yeah.
I always say I didn't force you to come here. If you don't want to hear what I have to say, you don't have to listen to me.
Just
You can
go away.
You can just leave. And I have people say to me, I'm not making you eat meat. How can you make me go vegan? And I'm like, excuse me? When I've never met you, if I'd made you go vegan, you'd be vegan, wouldn't you? And I didn't.
So one last really funny thing that I always think. I think one of the sort of taglines of your site is this plans though thing. So I think from what I understand, it's based on this argument that people say, well, you know, animals are sentient. Your argument is that you can't eat sentient beings. Well, aren't plants just as sentience, and therefore shouldn't you eat any plants? Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So where did that come from? Because it seems to now be the tagline.
Yeah, I mean, people say to me quite regularly, it's a silly cop-out argument. Well, what about the plants? You know, it's just stupid. But I hear it frequently online. You say you've never had anyone say it, but I think people say it when they're backed in a corner and they have nothing else to say. It was one of my celebratory images. I think it was the 10,000 mark.
Yeah.
And I had lots of images poked around, and one of them said plants though on it. And I thought it was funny, so I made subsequent images which had that as the punchline, where someone had said, what about plants though?
Yeah, I think I still have the little button that says plants, so I think
It's just though is taken as though, you know, how disposable these arguments are. Lions though, ancestors though, the plants though.
Cool. And last bit, because we're almost at the end of this, one tip for long-term vegans, because you've been vegan for 14 years and you're still alive, so apparently it works.
Yes.
You know,
just
for
about.
Just about crawling around. So tips for long-term vegans.
Yeah, I would say just to do your own research, and as you find out new things, to not be afraid to adapt what you're doing. So rather than saying, here's the line, I'm going to continue to eat honey, once someone explains to you why eating honey is unethical, you shouldn't say, well, I already made that line. You should say, well, actually I disagree with that. And me personally, I found information about palm oil which makes me think that that's unethical, so I'm trying to do without palm oil. So be prepared to make progression beyond veganism or towards veganism wherever you're going. I think that people shouldn't be dogmatic about veganism. People shouldn't say, if you say, why do you do this? And you say, because it's vegan.
Yeah.
That's not a reason. That's just saying that you're doing it.
Yeah.
And the other tip that we mentioned earlier is just, I would recommend Dr. Gregor, who's an American nutritionist, Juliana Haver, who is a dietitian.
Amazing.
And my friend Max.
We'll put links for all of those.
Derek Treesize also.
So lastly, give me your book.
You can have this book.
I got this book today. This is actually Richard's book, and it's full of those comics that you can see on the site as well. I'm really, really happy. Thank you so much, and thank you for being on the channel as well.
You're welcome.
That's awesome. And then I'll see you guys next week. I hope you like this episode. If you want me to do more stuff like this, I will. Thank you to Norfolk and Norwich Library as well for letting us film here. Very nice. And see you next time. Bye.